So the Sonos new line of Era speakers have gotten quite a lot of attention recently. The Era 100 now has Bluetooth, has line-in with an optional dongle, and is capable of stereo on its own with an additional tweeter firing left and right. Now the Era 300 features the same connectivity options with Bluetooth and line-in, with additional support for Atmos with the upward firing driver. Now these you have read, but there are things that Sonos has not been explicitly clear about or decided not to tell us anyway. So today I'd like to discuss these and help you understand the fine print on these new Era speakers. Now the pointers are meant to come across as not as Sonos trickery, right? Just things that we might not have considered in the heat of the moment during launch, during the hubris of the whole launch event. But as with my channel, I like to dig everything up and discuss everything in detail to help you reach a buying or not buying decision. Now, this is an episode that is packed with a lot of information and explanation. Now, I can't do an upfront summary without explaining each point today. So you just got to power through the entire episode and stay around with me. Now, let's start by getting the most obvious feature out of the way. Atmos Music is now supported and decoded on the Era 300, the first standalone Atmos speaker from Sonos that is not a soundbar. Now there are two things here. First, Sonos has only ever supported Atmos in a soundbar format, which is the Beam Gen 2 or the Sonos Arc that I have there, which is also on the picture. Now, Sonos has never released an Atmos Music speaker. Now, Apple Music started pushing out Atmos tracks on their service in 2021, and other than the Apple HomePod, there was simply no other speaker out there which could play Apple Music Atmos tracks directly. And the second is that the Era 300 and the Sonos X2 app is going to be capable of pulling these Atmos tracks directly from Apple streaming service. Meaning to say, you no longer have to use an Apple TV, which is connected to an Atmos capable TV, which is then connected to the Beam Gen 2 or the Sonos Arc to get Atmos track. The Era 300 on its own is capable of getting Atmos tracks directly and decoding them to playback on the Era 300 itself. So if it wasn't made clear to you by Sonos, this is a big thing. We now have a HomePod's competitor from Sonos. Now, basically, Apple has allowed Sonos into this walled garden to play Apple Music's Atmos tracks. Competition, right? And this might simply be one reason, one very good reason to get the Era 300 to get Atmos Music. Now, for Atmos movies, this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. Now, to get Atmos, you will still need the Beam Gen 2 or the Sonos Arc. The Era 300 on its own won't make any system Atmos capable. So Sonos has not been clear about this, but in case you get lost in the world of marketing words thinking that the Era 300 will magically give you 2 channels of Atmos to your Sonos soundbar setup, note that it will not work for the Ray and the older Beam Gen 1, and the much older Play Bars and the Play Bass is also not supported. Now, I'm puzzled by the fact that it won't even pair. Now, according to a post on Sonos' own product FAQ page, the Era 300 will only work with the Beam Gen 2 and the Sonos Arc, meaning to say, even if you are willing to forgo the upward firing driver for Atmos effect, it cannot be paired in standard surround mode without Atmos. So this is a major limitation of the Era 300. Then again, if you're going for the Era 300 with anything other than an Atmos soundbar, you might as well get the Era 100 and save a whole lot more money. So on this point, let's dig a little bit deeper. When you pair the Era 300 with the Beam Gen 2 or the Arc, the Beam Gen 2 is going to use virtualized Atmos, right? Meaning to say you're only getting simulated Atmos from the Beam Gen 2 itself because there are no actual upward firing drivers on the Beam Gen 2. By adding 2 Era 300, you are getting 2 actual physical drivers firing Atmos sounds to the ceiling. So in effect, you'll be getting a tangible upgrade to the Atmos experience when you add these to the Beam Gen 2. Now the Sonos Arc, on the other hand, already has 2 physical upward firing drivers. And you add the two Sonos Era 300 and you'll get a total of 4 physical upward firing drivers. Now this will truly give you the top left and the top right, the rear left and the rear right Atmos channels. So did you know that Atmos coded material does have all these channels discretely decoded? Meaning to say you're not combining any channels anymore. This way you will get full Atmos sounds from the front and the back, left and the right. Now the next thing that Sonos may not have been clear about is the positioning of the Era 300 speakers. Now Sonos recommends an 8-inch clearance to the sides of the speaker. Now this should actually be pretty obvious. While the Era 300 has a total of 6 drivers, only one of them is firing forward. The rest of the drivers are actually firing to the sides and one more up firing to the top. And when you don't leave enough room, enough space to the sides and the top, you're going to be blocking the output from those 5 other drivers. Now, in fact, I'm going to go as far as to say that you should ensure that the top of the Era 300 be completely unblocked. As with the Sonos Arc soundbar, you want to ensure that as well. You will want a clear line of sight from the top of the Era 300 to the ceiling. Now with all these considerations, note that you won't get the most out of the Era 300 if you're going to be shoving them into pigeonholes or bookshelves. So this is another point to note if you're considering the Era 300s, either as music speakers or surround speakers. Now let's talk about Bluetooth next. Both the Era 100 and the 300 now supports Bluetooth. Now, I'm not advocating that Bluetooth is the way to go. In fact, Sonos has always disdained Bluetooth, right? It is a low bitrate wireless protocol. It plays all sounds, including the notification from a connected device. So you won't want to be sending messages while you're listening to music on Bluetooth, as your music will constantly get interrupted with the dings and dongs from your messaging app. But well, Sonos is listening to the customers, right? And apparently a lot of users, a lot of us are asking for Bluetooth. Yes, it is convenient, but the music quality won't be as great as direct streaming. And when you use the Bluetooth function, note that Atmos is no longer supported, right? This is an important point to note. And obviously, Sonos is not plastering this all over the marketing material. You just have to know this as a limitation of Bluetooth, not so much of Sonos. Now, another couple of things that you didn't know about the Sonos Eras is the implementation of the Bluetooth. Now, the moment you connect the Eras as surround sound speakers, the Bluetooth functionality gets cancelled away. You won't be able to use Bluetooth to connect to the Eras if they are being used as surround speakers at the same time. Now, you are able to pair up a pair of Era 100 or 300 into stereo mode, and they will still retain Bluetooth functionality. So in short, Bluetooth works only for music deployment for Era speakers. But do note that both the Era 100 and the 300 needs to be set up via Wi-Fi first before you can pair them as Bluetooth speakers. So you aren't going to get Bluetooth functionality out of the box without the S2 app and without using Wi-Fi to set up the speakers. Now this brings us to the other connectivity option that Sonos has brought us with the Era speakers. Now they both have line-in support. Well, you do need a dongle. Yes, they can accept line-in inputs, but you need the dongle. And the thing is that Sonos is hiding this in small print. The line-in inputs are also deactivated when you pair the Era speakers into a home theater setup. So please don't make the mistake of buying the dongle, spending money on it, and yet you won't be able to use it because you're using them as surround speakers. Now let's talk a little bit about that line-in dongle. Now, if you wanted line-in functionality, you are going to need to spend at least another $19 US. The 3.5mm auxiliary port input jack for audio in is not built into the speaker itself. The dongle provides that when plugged into the USB-C port at the back of the speaker. Now at least you only need one dongle, even if you're going to pair up the ERAS into stereo configuration. Now before you go about thinking that you can cheap out and use any other third-party USB-C to audio adapter, I have to tell you that most certainly you can only use the Sonos original adapter. Now you have one of those USB-C to 3.5mm adapters around, they are likely to be taking a digital signal from a computer, phone or tablet to convert them into analog sounds to external speakers or headphones. The Sonos implementation is the other way around. Now it takes an analog signal and converts that analog signal into digital input for the ERA speakers. And these dongles aren't bidirectional. The one that you have is likely to be a digital to analog converter, DAC for short. The one that Sonos is making you buy is a ADC, analog to digital converter. So yes, you are probably going to have to pay the $19. And whenever you're using ADC for Sonos, right, bear in mind, including the Sonos M, the Sonos Portal, the Sonos 5, there will be a sound delay that is going to be introduced. Meaning to say, it will take a split second for Sonos to do the conversion before it plays the sound through the ERAS. Now, when you play music, this doesn't appear to be a problem because there's nothing to synchronize to. But when you use the line-in for audio and play video on the source device, for example, the TV or the computer or laptop, you will see and hear that the sound comes a little later than the video. Then you will experience what is known as lip sync issues. Some people are more sensitive to it, some less sensitive, but there will always be a lag. Now, Sonos says that both ERA speakers support Ethernet connection too, but you won't actually see an Ethernet port on either speaker. So that's right, there's another dongle to buy if you want Ethernet support, and that's the Sonos combo adapter, and that's $39. It is combo because it adds both the audio in as well as Ethernet jack. Now Sonos doesn't make a jack just for Ethernet, so if you need that functionality, you're gonna have to pay for both functionality. Now the good thing is that both ERAs are now Wi-Fi 6 compatible, which should in theory promise better wireless connectivity and stability over the entire range, longer range, right? But that will also mean that you need a Wi-Fi 6 network to benefit from that. It will work with the earlier Wi-Fi network, but just not Wi-Fi 6 stability and speed. Now, whether a third-party USB-C to network adapter will work remains unanswered. I will test that out when I get my hands on the speaker, so that's a question that you need an answer to. Do remember to subscribe and ring the notification bell so that you will be informed when I get the testing done and the video uploaded. Now on the Wi-Fi 6 support, there is a major issue on how it's being implemented. It probably won't affect a lot of users, but let me tell you, Sonos Net is no longer going to be supported. Now, why wouldn't it affect all? Well, most people do not plug the Sonos speakers to the network via an Ethernet port. Most of you are using it wirelessly, right? But if you do have the Sonos Boost, for example, the ERAs won't connect to the Sonos Net that is created by the Boost. Now, what does that all mean? Well, to be honest, if you have a relatively modern network or even Wi-Fi 6, all this means nothing, right? Now, bear in mind that Sonos Net is a 2.4 gigahertz network. It was created at a time when networks were far weaker and incapable of supporting too many devices. Now, most modern routers and networks are much more stable with Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 5 even, and if you have Wi-Fi 6, the likelihood is that it will actually perform better than Sonos Net itself because Wi-Fi 6 is 5 gigahertz and Sonos Net is 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, and Wi-Fi 6 is capable of supporting far more devices. Now, the ERAs won't be the only speaker dropping support for Sonos Net. I suspect that future speakers released from Sonos will also start to lose the support. Now, the truth is that Wi-Fi 6 is a far better wireless standard than the 2.4 gigahertz band that Sonos Net uses. And the move, the Sonos Roam as well, it already stopped supporting Sonos Net. So this move to drop Sonos Net actually began more than 3 years ago with the launch of the Sonos Move, which was in 2019. So Goodbye, Sonos Net. Back to the cable front. Another thing that Sonos has not mentioned about is the power cable. Now, the power cable has been redesigned. Now, I've always been pretty happy with the proprietary power cable that Sonos has introduced with the ones and the newer designs with the flush mounting that comes with the speakers, the newer speakers at least. Now, the ones are angled and allows for the power cable to go under the speaker. The flush mounted ones are secure and they make the speaker look very well designed and expensive. Now, the power cables for the Sonos One, they have a smaller head and they are angled at 90 degrees. So the effect is that they don't stick out like how it sticks out on the Sonos 5. So the new power cables, they have a smaller head and they are angled at 90 degrees. So the effect is that they don't stick out like how it sticks out on the Sonos 5 today. So this is a good design change and it lends an overall cleaner design to the speakers. Now, the Era 100 still has the power cable running below the speaker, so that is a good thing. The Era 300 has the power cable at the back, but because it angles 90 degrees, it sits quite flush with the speaker and it doesn't stick out. Now, on the Era 300 with Sonos original stands, they run down nicely to the stands and the cables are flush fit into the stand itself. It lends a very nice clean look without any dangling cables. Now, I love that design, I love that setup, but the next thing that Sonos isn't actually being very clear about is the cost of the stands. My God, these stands for the Era 300 is $150 each, right? If you buy a pair, you will get a bit of savings, but that's still $280. The stands for the Era 100 is $140 and a pair will set you back $270. Equally expensive, but then again, they aren't a whole lot more expensive than the Sonos Ones and the Sonos 5 stands either. Now, I guess we should just wait for the aftermarket stands to appear and compare the pricing from there. Now, Sonos makes wall mounts as well for the Era 100 and the Era 300. The Era 100 wall mounts cost $70 each or $120 for the pair, and the Era 300 mounts cost $80 each and $130 for the pair. But they do look pretty well designed and, well, they are pretty and available in both black and white. So there is a last question which I am unable to ascertain the answer to right now, which is the question of the sub. Now, the Move and the Roams, both being battery powered and portable, are not able to pair with a sub, right? Because, you know, subs aren't portable. And when Bluetooth kicks in, the sub isn't Bluetooth, right? I can appreciate that line of reasoning and why the Sonos Move and the Sonos Roam won't support the sub. But that's exactly what I'm worried about, is that when you use the Eras on its own or paired in stereo for music and using Bluetooth, does the Era actually work with a sub? Now, in a home theater setup, yes, you have the Eras as surround through Wi-Fi connection, right? And you can have one or two subs, but that's because the control center is actually the soundbar itself, not when you are using Bluetooth, right? When you are using Bluetooth for music, will the sub simultaneously connect with the Eras through Wi-Fi at the same time that Bluetooth is active, right? And to use the sub for bass output through Wi-Fi. Now, I couldn't get a definitive answer at this moment, so I have to look for clues, right? One of the clues I got is that on the Sonos website itself, they are selling the Eras with the sub combo as a home theater upgrade kit. They're not selling that combination as a music combo. This worries me because I do want to enhance the bass coming out from the Era 100 and the 300 with a sub or sub mini. If Sonos disallows that, it will be a big mistake, given that the ones and the fives already allow for that. Now, the consolation is that the product page for the Sonos sub states that it will work with amplified non-portable products. Both criteria are matched by the Era 100 and the 300. So I dug a little bit deeper. Sonos Sub Mini document page requirement states that it will work with at least one amplified non-portable product, such as Era 100 or Ray. But the bigger Sub Gen 3 is a little bit less specific on its product page, stating that it will work with at least one amplified non-portable product without giving examples. Now the best outcome from here is that both the Era 100 and the 300 will work with any sub, big or small, through Wi-Fi or Bluetooth connection. The second best outcome is that it works with the sub when used on Wi-Fi, but disconnects the sub when Bluetooth connection is used. Now the worst possible outcome is that the Eras do not work with the sub at all, which is unlikely, but still remains a small possibility. Now, no doubt I will want to test that out when I get my hands on the Era speakers. And meanwhile, if you're keen to learn a little bit more about the Sonos Sub Mini, which I'm a big fan of, do consider checking out this video right here, which I made for the Sub Mini when it was launched half a year ago. Or if you want to know the full feature set of the Era speakers, you can check out that video right up here. I will see you in either one of those videos.